What up, what up? Welcome back, boys and girls. We are continuing the study and learning of all things related to, personal development today and character development more than anything. You want to increase your results in whatever you're doing, but all the things that matter your relationships, sales output, success in all the things that you choose to do in life, fulfillment in your church service and community service. Massive success and results in everything that you do. That's what this is a study of, and I'm going to be diving deeper into the 7 habits of highly effective people today. Coming soon, like I keep teasing, I've got a lot of stuff about persuasion and influence, and how to do that in a way that is a win-win for a customer and for the salesman, for the persuader. So the things that I really am passionate about talking about right now are truth-centered persuasion and influence, principle-centered or truth-centered character and personal development, leading yourself and then executing personal execution really, and then everything truth-centered revolving around leadership and leadership development, so the development of others in a principle-centered way, leading others. So we've got some good stuff coming. I'm going to get straight into our continued study of the 7 habits of highly effective people. It's been so good. I've absolutely loved this section where we've been talking about habit 2, which is begin with the end in mind, or the first creation. Covey says there is a principle that exists that is beyond anything that we can actually control or have an opinion about that will make it go away. And it is this enduring principle of the first creation, that all things are created twice. First in a thought or in our minds, spiritually one might say, and then second in the physical world. So this is consistent with the body of psychology called logotherapy. It's consistent with James Allen's work. It's consistent with learned optimism. Bob Rotella talks a lot about this in the sports psychology field and in the performance psychology field. This is a principle that is really powerful, that if we can harness it, it will be to our good. If we do not harness it, it might be to our detriment. And it's the habit 1, Covey talks about being proactive. So be proactive means that essentially you have to recognize that you already are the creator of your life, but realizing that you have the power to create any life that you want, get any sort of type of results that you want. You can take responsibility for that. You got to take responsibility for where you are, but you can also take responsibility for what you do in the future. Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind. Now that I am aware that I'm the creator of my life and I have the power to choose to live a life that's according to my values and get massive results in all the things I care about most, as a byproduct of that, what am I going to create? And habit 2 is the principles of personal leadership. So being able to say, am I cutting down trees in the right jungle, as Covey says? Am I actually working through the things in my life in a way that is in line with my values? And are my values stemming from true principles, using a compass to guide me, a true guiding North Star? So we've gone over mission statements, stuff like that. We're going to get straight into the study right now, though. This is where this stuff gets really good. And I absolutely, I'm thrilled to be doing this one, because as you study the 7 habits of highly effective people, one thing that you find is that it means, for me at least, I've found that it means something new to me every time I've studied it. And a lot of these principles are resonating with me in just a different way. So hopefully you're along for the journey there. If you like what I'm doing, please like the video on YouTube, share on Spotify and Apple. And I think a lot of people could benefit from this. But hopefully my salesmen are listening to this and they are enjoying it, at least following along. When you know, you know. Okay, so Covey's talked a lot about in Begin with the End in Mind, this idea of a personal mission statement. I really loved from yesterday the idea of that all things are created twice, and that when you choose to live your life and build your blueprint of your life off of a principle center, then you can feel comfortable in the decisions that you make and have the security, the wisdom, the guidance, the power to actually be making the right decisions, but also feel good about the decisions you make, regardless of how outside parties might feel or the circumstances around you. Really powerful. It gives you this energy and passion that, if you're in sales, it'll let you, if you're doing things in the right way based on a principle center, you're going to have more passion to persuade people to do what's in their best interest. Way more passion. You'll be way more uncomfortable with the rejection. You'll be way more comfortable with the uncomfortabilities that most people experience, like rejection, like the adverse circumstances of the heat or the whatever might happen in your cold calling or whatever, right? So let's get into writing a personal mission statement here. As we go deeply within ourselves, as we understand and realign our basic paradigms to bring them in harmony with correct principles, we create both an effective, empowering center and a clear lens through which we can see the world. We can then focus that lens on how we as unique individuals relate to that world. So once we have an understanding of like how these true principles function, like once we know how gravity works, now we can say, how do I relate to gravity? How can I harness that for my good and my benefit rather than break myself against it? Frankl says, we detect rather than invent our missions in life. That's a really powerful concept, I think. And this is something that I talked about yesterday in one of my trainings. That is like, it's really interesting how most people want to say like, oh, I just haven't found my passion yet, what I'm passionate about. If you listen to Darren Hardy, Darren says his kind of facetious comment to people that say, I haven't found my passion yet. He says, well, have you looked under your bed? Have you like turned over all the pillows to find it? Have you asked your grandparents so they can find it for you? Like, you don't find your passion. You decide what you're passionate about and then become passionate through the endeavor of the work. Really interesting idea, I think. So I like that choice of words, that we detect rather invent our missions in life. Remember that Frankl is the one who says that he as a psychiatrist, as a world-renowned psychiatrist and who was in the death camps in Nazi Germany said, or Poland maybe he was, but he was in the Nazi death camps. He himself said that he felt that most mental illnesses that ail us in our lives, the mental illnesses that affect us, are caused from an underlying sense of meaninglessness, which is crazy. It's very powerful. I think that's really hard for people to admit, frankly. Myself being someone who has kind of had chronic experiences with those things. But getting really introspective, I think that that's true, certainly for me. I can't speak for everyone, but we detect rather than invent our missions. I like that choice of words. I think each of us has an internal monitor or sense of conscience that gives us an awareness of our own uniqueness and the singular contributions that we can make. In Frankl's words, everyone has their own specific vocation or mission in life. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as his specific opportunity to implement it. I want to spend a second on this paragraph here because one of my favorite it's so cool how I find all these like common threads from people that are like these great minds. So Peter Thiel, one of the things Peter Thiel has said is that we should all be asking ourselves, and this is kind of my interpretation about what he said about starting a company that would be really impactful, that we should really all be asking ourselves, like, if I don't do something for someone in my life, or if I don't go spend my life in an endeavor to do something unique, that I can answer this question, if I don't do this, no one else will, then you could argue that you're just a kind of a cog in the wheel. And it's like, life isn't as worth living if you're not doing it that way. I feel like it's still worth it, but I don't think it's as worth it as if you do it in the way that Peter Thiel suggests, which is, if I don't do this thing, who will? Or like, if I am not this thing for someone else in my life, then no one else will be that thing. I have a uniqueness about me, a contribution that I can make an effect on people in the world, that if I don't do it, then no one else will, because they're not me. And I've tried to take that approach and invite like the people that have worked with me to take that approach too. If you guys are listening to this, it's like, you really need to, especially if you're like building a team leader, especially if you are whether you're a recruiter or a high performing sales rep, ask yourself that question, that what's the one thing that I can do that if I don't do it, nobody else will? And I think you could ask yourself that question in your church and community service as well. Like, what's the one thing that I could do as I'm a part of this unit or ward or congregation, that if I don't do it, nobody else will? What's the one thing that like God could use me as a tool to be, that if I'm not that tool, then it will be very hard for someone else to be that tool? Why? Because they're not shaped the same way as me. They're not the same. They haven't gone through the same chiseling, shaping experiences as I have. They haven't rolled down the mountain in a rough stone rolling type of way that I have. haven't like come up against all of the hardships that I have, or had all the successes that I have. So I'm unique, right? There's something about me that makes it so that if I am not that thing for someone else, then no one else could be. And so I think it's important in all of the roles of our life to ask that question, to say like, one, is the way I'm currently behaving just replaceable? Because that's not super fun. Like we all have to start that way, right? Martin Luther King's wife once said that when she was asked why she never remarried, Martin Luther King's wife said, because I felt that anyone that I could remarry to would be a downgrade from my first marriage. So interesting, right? That's good. Martin Luther King, for her, was irreplaceable. But like, I think we all have to ask ourselves that question as well. It's like, am I irreplaceable in my marriage? And what's the one thing that I'll be for the person that I've chosen to love, that if I'm not that, nobody else could be that? And that there's this uniqueness about my mission and contribution in all the roles and aspects of my life. Could someone come along and just replace me as a son and give all the same value that I'm giving to my parents? Could someone come along and replace me in my work and just give all the same value? Because if so, then I'm probably not worth that much monetarily speaking in terms of value to society, let alone to my boss or my work, right? But at the same time, like, if I can, so in that same token, on the flip side of the coin, if I can provide a uniqueness that nobody else could provide, that actually truly gives value in a synergistic way to an organization, to my sales crew, as a team leader, to the people that I'm leading, if I could truly do that, and follow what Viktor Frankl here is saying, which is like, detect what your unique mission in life is, and then use that as an asset in all the roles in your current life, including your work. And as you can do that, like he says, I think we all have a monitor or a sense or a conscience that gives us the awareness of our own uniqueness and singular contributions that we can make. Really get introspective about those singular contributions you can make. And then in Frankl's words, we all have a specific vocation or mission in life. We can apply that vocation or mission to the thing that we are doing currently. Therein, we cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as is his specific opportunity to implement it. Now, I think that that's really fascinating, because whatever you're choosing to do right now, you can apply that in. And you can apply that in the type of student you are, the type of relationships you have with people around you. You can apply that in, again, your church and community service. But it's also, I think, powerful to apply in your work, because otherwise you're just making money to pay the bills and to create a life for yourself, when in reality you could be creating that life while you're doing the work, and contributing to the people around you. Especially if you're working with me in this job, what we do, you are literally an entrepreneur borrowing my and other people's money to go have this type of contribution and to fail along the way, because I'm willing to be patient as people practice and play this legacy game where like we go actually impact people's lives, so that when you see people in the grocery store down the road, they're the ones that are walking with their kids and they're like, hey, remember, that's Hayden. I told you about him. I tell you about him all the time. He changed my life, right? Insert your name there. So I think that's important to realize, is that like, as part of your mission statement, as part of this beginning with the end in mind and realizing like, what contribution do I really want to have to the people around me? You can start to detect what that mission is in your unique talents and abilities. And if you're not familiar with them, then you should really try to get to know yourself a little bit. We should all try to get to know ourselves a little bit more. That's one of the reasons why I've really enjoyed doing this, like, it's so silly, this float tank stuff, because one, the Navy SEALs do it. That's sick. But also, and I understand why, it's like amazing. It's incredible. There's some hyper learning stuff happening there. And again, I'm not going to let you in on all my secrets, but there are some more. But this level of self-awareness that you can start to develop when you shut out all the noise helps you realize, like, what are the things that I don't like about myself that I need to change and own and then change? And then also, like, what actually am I really good at? And what was I born with? It's a unique contribution that I could use as an asset to those around me, so that I could write on a piece of paper and really mean it and say, like, I am the type of person that if people do not work with me, then they will miss out on these things. No one will ever be able to provide those things for them in their life. They might have other good things, I promise. But my unique contribution, people should be begging to work with me. And I'm talking like, you should be saying this as a leader or as someone who's really trying to make a dent and impact in the world. People should be begging to work with me because I provide this. These are my unique talents, abilities, my mission. This is my unchanging identity and core, that if no one else, if people do not work for me, they will miss out on this unique thing that will change their life. Again, they'll have a great life. They'll be able to be impacted in other ways by other people, but I have this uniqueness about me, this mission. And that's really what Covey's getting at when he says begin with the end in mind. It's not just about building a blueprint for a massive, sales season goal, although the principles in this will apply to that and having increased results because of it. Like as Covey states all the time, a quantum increase in results, ever exponential increase in results by doing it this way. However, what he's really saying is like, you can when you start to detect that unique mission and contribution that you have and no one else does, that I have that no one else does, that we have that no one else does, that's where things start to get really profound. That's where this you fill that underlying sense of meaninglessness with something that is truly meaningful, and the confidence, the power, the wisdom, the guidance that comes from it. It's incredible. It's life-changing. It's amazing. It's true, right? Okay, so in seeking to give verbal expression to that uniqueness, we are again reminded of the fundamental importance of the proactivity and of working within our circle of influence. So like one of the things that I've always been reminded of every year that I study the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is this idea that it all comes back to proactivity. And to the extent that we can work within that circle of influence, as Covey says, and focus on the things that we can control, our direct or indirect control, or focus on ourselves in those circumstances that we can't control, that's where we start to get into this really cool realm of possibility with building out what life we want and that will be most meaningful. In seeking to give verbal, I'm going to read this again just to give context. In seeking to give verbal expression to that uniqueness, he's referring back to what Frankl said about the fact that we have a unique vocation or mission in life. We're again reminded of the fundamental importance of this principle of proactivity and working within our circle of influence. To seek some abstract meaning in our lives out in our circle of concern is to abdicate our proactive responsibility, to place our own first creation in the hands of circumstances and other people. So what he's saying is like when you start to choose goals, I'm going to just relate this first to sales goals or any other goals that you have of accomplishment, because this applies to everything. It passes the stress test of true principles. It applies to everything. And then we'll relate it back to like the mission in life. So like, I think what Covey's saying here is, this is my interpretation of it. When I try to choose goals for me that are in my circle of concern, that I actually can't control, then I abdicate my proactive responsibility. I do away with it. I place the circumstance outcomes out into the ether in control of something that is beyond me, therefore not achieving the things that I want. So yeah, again, to seek some abstract meaning into our lives out in our circle of concern. So like the more abstract that meaning or the goal or whatever you're focusing on trying to become, the more abstract it is, the less power you actually have to operate within it. Our meaning comes from within, he says. So our meaning doesn't come from some outside source. Our meaning comes from within. In the words of Frankl, ultimately man, this is one of my favorite quotes ever, ultimately man should not ask what the meaning of life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. I like that in a different color so I remember this is like the kicker, right? And so I think that's where like we run the risk of making mistakes where you start to derive your own personal meaning from achievement that is in a different circle, from family, from something that's changing, from work. Whereas what he's saying is like our deep meaning comes from within, and that operating from outside in or inside out, from the inside out rather than from the outside in, is what actually gives us the power to be responsible for the purpose of our life. Personal responsibility or proactivity is fundamental to the first creation. Returning to the computer metaphor, habit 1 says you're the programmer. Habit 2 says write the program. Until you accept that idea that you are responsible, that you are the programmer, you won't really invest in writing the program. Oh, that's so cool. That is so cool. Until you accept the idea that you are responsible, that you are the programmer, you won't really invest in writing the program. Maybe that's why I had this idea this early on this year as I was working with a couple of my sales leaders where like their goals were just so abstract and they didn't really have specific plans for them. Like they weren't actually going and writing down like their blueprint and like treating it like a thesis statement where they'd have to defend it and be able to have all the details worked out, because that's really the best way to ensure the highest likelihood that you achieve the goals that you want, or at least one of the ways. And I had this thought, I was like, I wonder if the reason why they're not getting really honed in on this first creation process is because they're not as proactive as they think they are. They're not actually accepting responsibility for the outcomes in their current life and in the life that they could choose. And so therefore, they're not taking time to write the program. And so that was kind of like this inkling of thought that I had. And really, it's somewhat validated by what Covey says here, where he's saying that until you accept the idea that you're responsible, both for where you are now, for the circumstances, the fact that you can actually choose what you want, that you're the programmer, until you accept the responsibility for you being in charge of the program of your life, you won't really invest in time in writing the program. You won't really invest time in writing the program, or you won't invest in it at all. Dude, that's a breakthrough. Dang, mic drop there. As proactive people, we can begin to give expression to what we want to be and do in our lives. We can write a personal mission statement, a personal constitution. A mission statement is not something you write overnight. It takes deep introspection, careful analysis, thoughtful expression, and often many rewrites to produce it in final form. It may take you several weeks or even months before you feel really comfortable with it. Before you feel it is a complete conscious expression of your innermost values and directions. Even then, you will want to review it regularly and make minor changes as the years bring additional insights or changing circumstances. But fundamentally, your mission statement becomes your constitution, the solid expression of your values and your vision. It becomes the criterion by which you measure everything else in your life. I recently finished reviewing my own mission statement, which I do fairly regularly. Based on Covey's example here, I've tried to do this recently more regularly myself. I visit at least once a year, but I've been doing it almost weekly at this point, which is really insightful, frankly. Sitting on the edge of a beach alone at the end of a bicycle ride, I took out my organizer, hammered it out. It took several hours, but I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of organization and commitment, a sense of exhilaration and freedom. Dude, if there's any way I could describe like how that feels, that's definitely it. You start to feel this sense of liberation when you really get clear on what your vision and your values are. I find the process as important as the product. And that's so you remember yesterday, one of the insights that we had was that when you make decisions based off of true principles and try to be principle centered when there are dilemmas. So like my boss wants me to come into work to help, but I already committed to go on a date with my wife, something along those lines. When you make decisions based off of the true principles, Covey's argument is that the decision you make is actually fairly low on the totem pole for impact. Like it's fairly meaningless compared to the reasons behind the decision, the expectations you set with the parties involved, and with your own experience and the context that it brings to your life as a whole. So the outcome of the decision, the final product, is much less meaningful. It's meaningless compared to the process of making that decision and what it does to you as a person and to the parties involved. That's kind of an interesting insight, that the crossover there for when you're building a mission statement. The process is as important or more important perhaps than the product itself. Writing or reviewing a mission statement changes you because it forces you to think through your priorities deeply, carefully, and to align your behavior with your beliefs. As you do, other people begin to sense that you're not being driven by everything that happens to you. You have a sense of mission about you, what you're trying to do, and what you're excited about. And you're excited about it. That's really interesting. I love that. Okay, I'm gonna finish up here because that's I think for me that's where it's where it really it kicks off. There's so much to Habit 2. I freaking love all this stuff. We're just gonna keep going through it though, because I think these principles are incredibly important. He'll talk about how to actually. This is what we're gonna get into next time. Is how to actually go about writing this mission statement to align your life with with your unique purpose. How do you go discover that? He calls these right brain activities. I've got a few that I really like that I'll share with you, and some thought experiments that you go through to actually get to your center and identify your vision and your values and what you're all about. And like Covey says, the results of doing that, it's worth the time putting into it, because the results of doing that cause you this liberation, like this freedom, this excitement that very few things can actually cause and do in your life. So that's what we're going to be going over next time. Thanks for joining me on my study today, guys. And if you liked what we talked about today, hopefully you're following along. And it'd be really cool if you even did this for yourself too, because it's just so massively impactful. But I'm just thanks for listening. For those that are, honestly, just really grateful. And follow for more if you guys like this stuff, if it's helpful to you. If it is, share it with other people. And certainly if you work with me, guys, definitely be sharing this with other people. I'm grateful for you guys for being on, and I'll see you guys in the next one.